Okay, great. I think we're live on YouTube now. And while we're waiting for people who participated in the Minds of Peace thing with you two, why don't you introduce yourselves and talk about the other initiative?
اتفضل اتفضل لا اتفضل. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Gershon Baskin. I'm an Israeli political and peace activist for many years. I've been involved in efforts to advance a two-state solution since forever. Um, Samer Sinjalawi and I, colleague, are working together on the creation of the Israeli-Palestinian Alliance for the Two-State Solution. It comes riding on the Global Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution, a Saudi, Norwegian, European Union, French initiative that was started with the General Assembly of the UN in September. The Global Alliance is a governmental body which has had 3 meetings already, one in New York, one in Riyadh, one in Brussels. There'll be another meeting of the Global Alliance this month in Oslo. As I said, the Global Alliance is a governmental alliance. The Palestinian Authority participates, but the State of Israel does not. And we thought it would be proper to create a civil society initiative in Israel and Palestine of people who believe in supporting the two-state solution. Our initiative comes on the back of another initiative that we launched in the end of the summer of a proposal by former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and former Palestinian Foreign Minister Nasser al-Qudwa. We brought them together and they agreed on a proposal which deals with ending the war in Gaza, freeing the hostages, a Palestinian prisoner release, and a new governmental structure in Gaza, which would be civilian, professional, technocratic, with the head of the governing council in Gaza appointed by the Palestinian president, because that's the legal way to do it, but the council in Gaza for a temporary period of 24 to 36 months would be independent to the Palestinian Authority and would work on stabilizing the situation there, creating security with the help of Arab states, Arab-led international presence in Gaza for a number of years while reconstruction begins. The initiative also deals with the two-state solution along the 1967 borders with a 4.4% territorial swap of land from the West Bank to Israel and from Israel to the Palestinian state, and a solution for Jerusalem, which includes 2 capitals in Jerusalem, Israel and Palestine, and the Old City under an international non-Israeli, non-Palestinian regime, of which is the state of Israel and the state of Palestine would be part of, but there would be no exclusive Israeli or Palestinian sovereignty in the Old City of Jerusalem. This is the initiative. That initiative, the Olmert al-Qudwa initiative, has been launched already for a number of months. They, together with us, have met with about 35 foreign ministers and had an audience with the Pope, and are busy presenting and in creating frameworks in the region for advancing it. We are planning in the month of February for an important Israeli-Palestinian gathering in support of this initiative. And we're trying to bring together other joint initiatives that advance the two-state solution.
For people who are less familiar with peace negotiations than the two of you, which is everybody in the world, could you slow down a little bit and say, the particular deal points that you're talking about, like why are those they're very carefully selected, right? So would you talk about them a little bit?
Well, this initiative came during very hard times. It came after the 7th of October. It came after 15 months, or when it started after 11 months of continuation of war in Gaza. And it came when both Palestinians and Israelis are living a cocktail of feelings, anger, grief, pain. And it came by 2 courageous leaders, mainstream leaders, a former Israeli prime minister who spent most of his life as a leader in the Likud. He was also the mayor of Jerusalem for 10 years. And from a Palestinian former minister of foreign affairs, who also a mainstream Palestinian from Fatah, although he's not part of the regime in Ramallah, he's from the opposition in Fatah. This is a different story. But still, these are two mainstream leaders. If they, under such conditions, were able to sign such a declaration, it means any Israeli and any Palestinians are capable to do this. The war in Gaza, I believe, did not.
Actually, could you explain that a little bit? Why do you say that?
Why I say that? Because, as I told you, these are high-profile leaders. These are mainstream leaders. These are not simply peace activists from the left of the political map on both sides. They are mainstream, and they represent the mainstream on both sides. And I was going to say that despite the fact that since the 7th of October, there was a lot of pain and grief, still the majority of Israelis and Palestinians are looking for a way to exit this conflict. We're talking about the mainstream. Of course, there are extreme powers inside both societies that whatever happens, they don't want to see any reconciliation or any political development. But the majority of Israelis and Palestinians would like to coexist and are capable to coexist. And the only way to coexist, since Israelis would like to have their own Jewish democratic state, and I think it's legitimate, they deserve and they need to have the recognition by everybody in the world that they have to have their own Jewish and democratic state. But in a Jewish and democratic state, you cannot have millions of non-Jews, because then either you will give them equal rights, and then you will lose the Jewish identity of the state, or you will keep them with no rights, and then you will lose the democratic aspect of the state. So the only way to be able to live in a democratic Jewish state is to separate from millions of Palestinians. And the only way to separate from millions of Palestinians is to allow a Palestinian state next to the Israeli Jewish democratic state. So the only option that is applicable, that can allow the Jewish people to fulfill their aspiration in their own Jewish democratic secured state, and for Palestinians to also fulfill their national aspirations into being free and independent under their own sovereign national state, is a two-state solution. Anything else is illusion. If we go towards a one-state option, unfortunately, a one-state will be Palestinian.
כל מיני אנשים עכשיו בזום. ורדה, אריק, גרשון בסקין.
אני מציע, מיקי, לשים את עצמך בזהו, במיוט.
So, if we take off the two-state option from the table, what's left for us is a one-state solution. And the one-state solution, unfortunately, and I say it as a Palestinian, will be a Palestinian state, because currently, between the river and the sea, there are 51% Palestinians and 49% Jews. So for the best interest of both people, we should try to achieve the two-state solution as soon as possible. And the war, the 7th of October, did not distance us. It might look that the 7th of October and the war has complicated things. But in reality, I think it brought us closer to political horizons for a simple reason. When this war ends, and I don't know if it will end tomorrow or in 1 month or 1 year, whatever the results of this war, we will find ourselves again, when this war ends, again, millions of Palestinians and millions of Jewish Israelis living on the same piece of land, and nobody is moving out. So as far as we continue pushing or avoiding the political horizons, we will keep suffering and paying price from both sides. So sooner better to come to this political horizons. Of course, there is issues of mistrust. Of course, there are concerns. I can understand that most of Israelis are worried about what kind of Palestinian political entity will be next to them. They are worried maybe this political entity will contribute to the lack of security, will be a threat to the state of Israel. These are legitimate concerns. We Palestinians need to take some measures and steps to try to prove to the Israelis that any coming Palestinian state will be maybe an ally to the state of Israel, that it will be a good neighbor to the state of Israel. And I think there is a lot to gain for the Israelis in addition to fulfilling the conditions for a Jewish democratic state. One of them, the interest from the Arab neighbors, especially the Saudi Arabia, to have a normalization agreement with Israel. So if out of this war, we will be able to bring Israelis, Palestinians, and Saudis to sign a regional arrangement that will, first of all, open all horizons of normalization between Israel and the Saudi Arabia. And when I say Saudi Arabia is the unchallenged leader of the Arab and Muslim world. And then we will bring peace between Israelis and Palestinians under the umbrella of the two-state solution. This is going to open a lot of horizons. It's going to change the lives of all the people of the region altogether. The impact of such agreement, peace agreement, is going to be huge for everybody. If I were an Israeli, I would voluntarily change the date of independence of Israel from the 14th of May to the date that Israel signs an agreement with the Saudi Arabia. Because Israel, at that moment, will change to be from the villa in the jungle to a villa in a very nice neighborhood. So there's a lot to win for everybody. And it's worth it. The only way that we respect the lives of those who have fell down on the 7th of October from the Israeli side, or those Palestinians who fell down starting from the 7th of October until today, is to bring peace. This is the only way to respect these lives. And it's the only way that we respect those, not only those who have lost their lives, those who are living now, even those who still did not or were not born from both sides. So this is the only avenue that we should all sign in. It's a peace of no choice, not a war of no choice.
So I'm going to break in because we now have our participants, so we can talk about what just happened in the last 3 days, and we can start to take questions from various people about it. And I'm going to use this time to share the document that was the result, and you two gentlemen can explain what it means, why this was the agreement that was come to, and what you'd like to see come out of it, and people will have questions. Does that make sense for you two folks? Great. Okay. So screen sharing. So yes, talk about what just happened in this Minds of Peace, and what this all means.
So over the last 3 days here in London, a group of significant Israelis and Palestinians and some others came together to try and put down on a document an agreed upon formula for the establishment of peace between the people of Israel and the people of Palestine in two recognized states, the state of Israel and the state of Palestine, which each would be independent and sovereign states, with an agreed upon formula for dealing with ending the war in Gaza and dealing with the issues of refugees and the future of Jerusalem. The premise of the agreement here is not the vision of two states as formulated in the failed Oslo peace process of two states behind walls and fences, of two people living in cages, but two states established on the basis of cooperation between them and the freedom of movement of people and goods between them, with the state of Palestine being the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, or Palestinian Jerusalem, and the state of Israel being the state of Israel in its pre-1967 borders, with the capital of Israel being the Israeli part of Jerusalem, an agreement that the old city of Jerusalem would be under a special regime that's not Israeli or Palestinian, recognizing the international importance of the old city of Jerusalem. This is a formula which gives guidelines on how our political leaders in Israel and Palestine need to proceed, understanding that the current leaders of Israel and Palestine are incapable of doing this. This is a call for new leadership amongst the Israeli and Palestinian people, together around common values and goals that will enable us to recognize that the people of Israel will never have peace and independence and security unless the Palestinian people have peace, independence, and security. And as such, in accordance with these principles, both people will end up having life and dignity. This is the basis of the understanding here. And we recognize that it's very difficult to go from the situation of extreme trauma that both peoples are living since October 7th. For Jews in general around the world and for Israelis, October 7th was the most traumatic event since the Holocaust. And Palestinians since October 7th are living a bigger trauma than they experienced in the Nakba in 1948. We need to ensure that this is the end of trauma for the peoples of Israel and Palestine, and that this war that we're seeing in Gaza needs to come to an end, and it has to be the last war between Israel and Palestine. The only way to do that is to recognize that both people have the right to have the same right to the same rights, and that both people must have the right to self-determination, understanding that these two states cannot exist in peace unless there is cooperation between them. I would like to add, as Samer spoke a lot about Israel being a Jewish and democratic state, Israel is also a state where 20% of its citizens are Palestinians, and the state of Israel itself must be a democratic state where all people living in the state of Israel as citizens of the state of Israel have the same right to the same rights. The democracy is not just an empty word. The state of Israel must be a state of all of its citizens, even if it has a clear Jewish majority. The Palestinian citizens of Israel must be equal citizens of Israel who have the same rights as the Jewish citizens of Israel. And there will be a Palestinian state next to Israel, which will answer the needs of the Palestinian people for freedom, liberation, security, and dignity as well.
Great. Rafi, I would love for you to be asking some questions. You imagine for a moment that there were a vibrant movement that was pushing all the relevant governments to support this direction. You know, what concerns would you have, Rafi? If you could start to ask some questions of that form, it'd be awesome, I think. Rafi, are you able to participate? He can't unmute. Oh, wow. Ask to unmute. Are you able to unmute now, Rafi? No, you still can't unmute. Weird. What do I do? I have the ask to unmute, allow to, oh, you have to click the allow to record button before it will let you unmute. That's something for everyone. If you don't accept that it's being recorded, it may not let you unmute. So is there a way to do that?
Okay, I did that.
Great. Okay.
So
So
first of all, I'd like to say, first of all, I'm very familiar with Buskin from Jerusalem Post articles, and it's great hearing you. I'm hearing wonderful sounds from both of you. It's just really wonderful. I don't know if introductions were made, but I don't know our Arab colleague here, and I'd like to hear more about you. This is interesting. What was your name? Was it Samir or what was it?
Tamer Sinjilawi.
Hello, everyone. I can't contribute because I'm going to check in my place and in the way. So I'm listening to you. Then I have to settle this issue and come back to you.
great. Come back when you can. Thanks so much.
So am I being heard, first of all? I can't.
You sound very good, Rafi.
Very well. In any case, I'd love to hear about the colleagues. The sounds are wonderful. Basically, you are painting a utopia, which I think many of us dream about and would love to have. That's wonderful. We have to get, however, to the crux of the matter, which is a lack of trust. And it's a problem on the Israeli side, and it's a greater problem on the Arab side, I believe. I think it's a more challenging internal convincing effort on the Palestinian side to get that population in line with what we're hearing from our Arab presenter than it is on the Israeli side. It's hard enough on the Israeli side, and I think it's harder on the Arab side. If that were possible, basically from the Israeli point of view, we see what happens when there is no Israeli involvement. We've looked at Gaza as a test bed of what happens if you're left on your own. And actually, we even see within the West Bank how much the extremist elements are succeeding in gaining ground, and they're held back by the Palestinian Authority and by Israeli security support, and unfortunately very active interventions from time to time, which is ugly, but it seems necessary. If I, as an Israeli, could sit back and say, they're going to be interested in their own welfare. They're going to accept that we exist. They're not going to be trying to destroy us, not trying to erase the effect of the 1948 War of Independence. And in other words, the Nakba is heritage is not going to dominate the forward thinking. That's really the question. We understand there have been awful things done and awful suffering on all sides, no question about that. But in order to move forward, you need to be able to trust that the other side wants the general welfare as much as you're going to want the general welfare. If that trust is there, I'd love to see this moving forward. I would love, however, to see more people sounding like our Arab presenter. That would be wonderful. And we have had such grassroots movements in the past. No question, was Avi Dichter and Nusayban, and we have had some wonderful efforts, but they haven't been able to seed a larger movement that is willing in an outspoken fashion to say, this is what we want.
Yeah, Rafi, before Samer speaks, I would just like to say that since the Second Intifada in the year 2000, what we have seen on both Israel and Palestine is a majority of Israelis and a majority of Palestinians who have said, I want peace, but they don't. And each side has been justifiably able to claim that the other side is not interested in living in peace, because that's the reality that they live. Both Israelis who see Palestinians and say they don't want to live in peace with us, and Palestinians who every day see Israelis and say they don't want to live in peace with us. The major push of our effort now is to create partnerships between Israelis and Palestinians of significance who are saying together, appearing together, speaking together, writing together, and saying, we both want to live in peace. In order to do that, we need to respect the mutual right of each other to have self-determination, to have a state of our own, to live in independence and security. This needs to be mutual. It's not just the problem that the Israelis don't trust the Palestinians. It goes both ways.
Absolutely.
And we believe that when we have people of significance on both sides who are declaring, we recognize that Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs are here. Palestinians, and here I quote one of the most significant Palestinian academics, Professor Rashid Khalidi, who said that Palestinians will never justify the existence of the Zionist movement. That's a historical argument. Nonetheless, the reality is that there are 7 million Palestinians and 7 million Israeli Jews living on the land between the river and the sea. And even if we don't recognize the justification of the existence of the Zionist movement, we recognize that Israel is there to stay and the Israeli Jews are there and they have a right to be there. Jews historically, there isn't a Muslim alive who can honestly say that the Jews are not connected to the land of Israel. But as my friend Samra always says, we Palestinians need to recognize that Jews have always been in the land of Israel, but we need to remind the Jews that they were never there alone. There were always others, and the others are Palestinians. And this is a reality that both sides need to understand. When
Gershon
this
is completely
Gaza,
convinced.
1 second in Rafi, when this war is over, this horrible war, there will remain 7 million Israelis and 7 million Palestinians on this land between the river and the sea. And that's what we need to recognize. We need not to go back to history and say, okay, the Jews were justified in creating their state in the land of Israel. That was yesterday. We need to look forward and saying, okay, they're here. Both peoples are here, and both peoples cannot deny the right of the other to be here.
Completely agree, and I like many points that have been made, including the point by Samir that this may be actually a greater opportunity than we realize. So maybe to the outside world, it seems like we've ruined any chance of moving forward. On the contrary, I think people in the region on both sides are aware of how we got here. What is Hamas's action? What is Israel's action? It all makes sense to the people there, and we all know we don't want this to continue like this. That said, and granted that both sides say my reason for not going along is because I don't trust the other side, we clearly what that requires is an incremental improvement in the trust. So what steps can be taken incrementally to break down this distrust of one side for the other side?
Well, Rafa, I think it's enough that one side started to change to have the impact and influence on the other side. And I think it is for the Palestinian side that we need to start the first steps for a simple reason. We are under a more serious sense of urgency to exit this conflict. If you compare the situation of Palestinians to the Israelis, they do pay a price for this conflict. But again, Israel is an OECD country, has a strong army, very developed economy, startup nation. They have a good passport that connects them with the world without visa. They have Ben Gurion that is, connecting them to the whole world. So they can survive another 75 years under this conflict, okay, with some pain and price, but still they can manage. We, the Palestinians, we don't have all of this, and we cannot wait another 75 hours for this conflict to continue. So the sense of urgency is more on our side. So we need to take the first step into showing the Israelis that there is a change among Palestinians. And the change, it means that we need to change our way of thinking, and we need to change our leadership. And it applies on the Israeli. But if we make the first steps, then the Israelis will start seeing a change and trying themselves also to think about what they could change to help that change on the Palestinian side. I think the changes should start on something that Gershon has mentioned now, on the narrative. Currently, there are two narratives who are fighting each other. But with a minor change on these narratives could be combined together to be one narrative that represents both of us. By us Palestinians recognizing the rights, historical rights of Jews in this land, everywhere in this land, from Hebron to Shechem to Jaffa to everywhere. And for Jews realizing that above their historical rights and together and in parallel to their historical rights that now are not challenged by Palestinians, but recognized by Palestinians, they have never been alone in this land. There was always others, and these others, despite the fact I will agree that there have never been a Palestinian people, but these millions of people, the others who have been always in this land, are willing now to recognize ourselves as a Palestinian people, and we have the right to have this identity now, even if it was not clear in name in the past.
I mean, I would be happy with even less than what you're saying right now. I'm sort of with Gershon in that it's okay to have some divergence of narrative as long as we cooperate on how we move forward. If you could make progress on the Palestinian side to get more to subscribe to your view, which is a very welcome and encompassing view, that would be great. But even short of that, just acceptance that the way forward is not going to be to keep trying to eliminate the state of Israel because of some wrong done in the Nakba, whatever. That's not a productive way forward. If we can get proof, we can see that more people are saying we need to have a progressive, practical, forward-looking policy instead of constantly saying, yeah, we're suffering now, but we're suffering now because what we really need to do is eliminate the state of Israel. That's not good for either side. And you're absolutely right. And I would be happy with even less than what you're saying. As an Israeli, I would be happy with even less than what you're saying.
Well, this
You
is not
completely
enough.
understand the picture. I don't expect everybody on the Arab side to completely understand the picture, but if they understand enough to allow breaking the distrust and having practical steps forward, that would be wonderful.
This is not enough alone. What should be revised also is the Palestinian strategy into dealing with the problem. Currently, we believe that by using some violence on the ground against Israelis, in parallel to trying to mobilize the whole world against Israel, we can achieve some results. It didn't work for...
It's a losing strategy, absolutely.
Pressure is not the right tool in this conflict, and it is not the right tool with the Jewish people. We cannot pressure Israelis. It has been proven. But we can persuade Israelis. And if we start thinking in a way where my mission should be as a Palestinian, not to defeat the Israelis. My mission should be defeating the fear inside the Israelis, because the lack of security is something genuine. It is not propaganda. It's there. The Israelis, they have fear. And my job should be defeating this fear in their hearts. I should be able to touch their hearts and minds and convince them that now I would like to coexist with them, that now I would like to develop a Palestinian strategy that puts in its basis the security of the Israelis, but not to do them a favor, more out of a Palestinian national interest.
Yes.
And I need to open the horizons for them to understand that for them, it's also very important to develop an Israeli strategy that puts in its basis the human dignity and the freedom of the Palestinian, not out of charity to the Palestinian, but also out of a national Israeli Jewish
Self-interest as well.
interests. When these strategies start to play in front of each other, taking into consideration that we have brought a narrative that is good for both of us, a narrative that shows us that we had common history together in this land, a positive common history. If we have this common history, we will be able to find the common future once we are using the right tools. For me, a political horizon, a Palestinian national project of a Palestinian state cannot be achieved via Washington, D.C., or via Riyadh, or via Cairo, or Berlin, or London. It could be achieved via Tel Aviv, and Rishon LeZion, and Haifa, and every neighborhood in Israel. I don't need to mobilize the world against Israel. I need to convince the Israelis on what I am offering. And for this, I don't need to continue scoring more countries to recognize the state of Palestine. I can reach to 190 countries recognizing Palestine. If Israel does not recognize Palestine, I didn't achieve anything. The only state that I need to convince to recognize Palestine is the state of Israel, the people of Israel. So I should focus, instead of having more Palestinian embassies in Africa and Latin America, and I don't know where, I need to open liaison offices in every neighborhood in Israel. That's where I need to do the work. So
that's
change
wonderful.
of strategy is a change of our way of thinking, needs a change of leadership. A
I
new
agree.
leadership capable to do this change. If I start this change, the Israelis will start relaxing, they will open their hearts and minds, and they will start doing business with us and listening to us. Now we are not able to catch the eyes and the ears of the Israelis.
What's important to recognize here, Rafi, is that Samer, and the voice of Samer, comes from the mainstream of the Palestinian streets, but from the opposition to the existing Palestinian Authority government, who recognize that the strategies of the Palestinian leadership of the last 75 years have been a failed strategy for the Palestinian people. And these are the new voices that are coming out of Palestine.
I'm glad to hear that they exist. So opposition to the
let me
current
ask-
Palestinian leadership is on both sides. You have the opposition of what you're describing as the mainstream that actually just want good lives and practical recognition of each other's need to exist in peace and prosperity. But there's also the opposition from the side of Hamas and
Listen,
the people that undermine. And on the Israeli side, there are extremists that also do some undermining. So the
our
challenge is-
listen,
Let me ask.
hold on,
as a
Eric,
possible
one
answer to-
sentence. Eric, one sentence. Our assumption is that in Israel and in Palestine, there's about 30% of the public that will say no to any peace agreement. It's about 30% on each side, but there's a potential of 70% both in Israel and in Palestine, who, if they believed that the other side was willing to live in peace, they would also be willing to live in peace. And our target is not the extremists. We're not going to change the extremists, but there's 70% of Israelis and 70% of Palestinians who can be convinced if they believe there were people like themselves on the other side.
Eric, before I continue, I'd like you were going to interject something. Eric.
I'm going to ask if among the trust building strategies were joint venture companies.
There are many such. This is
But
what I was
is
going to say,
that,
Eric,
at
sorry
this
to
particular
interrupt you.
moment, does
But
doing
one-
more of that make sense? If so, how would you
Helps.
do it? What kinds of trust building things make sense to all of you folks more specifically? I was just thinking.
Just as a
some kind
preface
of
before we get an
intervention.
answer from our presenters, I just want other listeners to realize there are many, many, many grassroots efforts, many joint ventures, companies, joint research done, all kinds of collaborations going on. So what we're talking about is making that blossom into a change at the leadership level and in what people are willing to say openly. So even if we say 70% would love to move in this direction, I don't think they feel comfortable saying that very openly. There's a real problem. On the Israeli side, it's easier in that respect. Being open about opposition to the government and wanting to move into a more peace-building direction. On the Arab side, it's more difficult. Culturally, there's a difference. So I just want to set the stage there. There are many, many such efforts, and your question stands to the presenters. How do we do it on both sides so that we can incrementally persuade basically a change of government because our trust situation has changed?
Well, I think this trust building process should start top down, not the opposite. Now, when I say first steps comes from Palestinians, when the Palestinian president or prime minister will put in his mind that his first obligation and task should be to make the Israeli prime minister his best friend, to try to create these bridges and mutual understanding top down. If the prime ministers, if the political elite of both sides starting trusting each other, it will have enormous impact quickly on the street. Currently, what's happening, and I will give you a small example. First of all, I'll give you a little bit of my background. I am a Palestinian born in the old city of Jerusalem 52 years ago. I was an ordinary kid who was living in the old city. I am a Muslim that went to a Christian school in the old city. I've never realized that there is a conflict in my city. Everything that I have been seeing around is part of my identity. Jews going to synagogues, Christians to churches, Muslims to the mosque. This is my identity until the first Intifada. When the first Intifada came and I started seeing the news, they are in jeeps with guns. We are covered by kufiyas throwing stones. Suddenly, it conquered me and it gave me an identity. And I think this conflict has given identity to both young generation on both sides. Suddenly, there is us and there is them. But, and I was Fatih always. And I'll tell you something. If we are able to create this good chemistry among the political elites on both sides, the impact on the street will be huge. What I wanted to tell you that I decided 1.5 years ago to do my master's degrees in conflict resolution and management in the Hebrew University. Now, the Hebrew University, when I went out of jail, because I started throwing stones in my city in the first Intifada, I was put into a 5 years jail inside an Israeli jail. When I was released, that's where I learned my Hebrew. And it was very important for me to have the Hebrew language to be able to understand the Israeli society. When I went out, I couldn't imagine that I can ever have the Hebrew University as an option for my study. At that time, it was an act of disloyalty. Today, when I signed for this master's degree in the Hebrew University, when I go each Monday to the Hebrew University at the queue at the gate for the security check, I get confused. Is this the Israeli Hebrew University or is it the Palestinian Birzeit University? Lots of girls are wearing hijab. 30% of the community inside the university, the Hebrew University, are Palestinians from East Jerusalem or from Arab Israeli cities. Now, I noticed something. Lots of our students and your students are wearing necklace with the whole map. Palestinians and Israelis. I can differentiate the Israelis from the Palestinians because the Israelis, they put the same map but with the Golan Heights. The Palestinians put the same map without the Golan Heights. And both necklaces are a product of the same factory in China. They wrap it differently and sell it to our kids. Now the question, do really these kids have the intention to throw the other side to the sea? Bullshit. For the simple reason that they have chosen to be together in the same university. and they go to the same classroom and they learn from the same professor. And sometimes this professor give them a group research where 2 Palestinians and 2 Israelis, everyone with his necklace, start working together and trying to develop the best research paper to get the highest score possible. So by nature, we are capable to coexist. This is our DNA. What makes us feel something else or go extreme is the bad leaders that we have on both sides that manipulated our thinking.
That's right.
That made us believe that it's only by comforting with the other side and using more violence the other side, I defend myself.
Amplifying the fears in order to achieve this.
Yes.
Proven strategy that if you amplify the fears of the other side, you can get more extremist positions on your side.
Okay, so once we have political elites on both sides that show their people that they are working together, that they trust each other. Okay, they might not agree on everything. There will be always difficulties. I think this process is like riding a bus. I can agree with you that I can define our destination for the coming 100 miles until I can come to the next crossroad. We don't need to agree now whether we are taking right or left. Let's ride the bus together.
Get to the crossroad.
And during this journey, both of us will change. We always, as a human being, can realize that we have changed from our past, but we never realize that we will change in the future. Both of us in this 100-mile, we will change. When we reach to the crossroads, we will be more capable to take a decision collectively to go right or left. So this is a
with
process.
Great wisdom, Samir. It's just wonderful to hear.
Well, it's not utopian. It comes from a politician that has been talking to the Israelis for 35 years. I knew Gershon for 30 years already.
Really?
Now. And I talked to Israel from wall to wall. I talked to the far left, to the center, and to the far right. And I tell the Israelis always, I know you better than you know yourselves because I talk to all of you, you don't talk to each other. And it was proven to me, every Israeli I meet, from left, center, right, I find some kind of common ground with him, different than the other, but still there is some common ground. And with this kind of attitude, this common ground every day expands. So my personal success individually with each Israeli I know could be a collective success if my strategy will be the national strategy for the Palestinians.
Absolutely. I think if we were all like you, we had no problem at all. There wouldn't be an issue at all.
Now, some Israelis might say, but you are an individual. Fine. Then instead of delegitimizing this individual, try to support this individual. We need to support these voices on both sides and try to give them the right environment to expand and be the majority and not to kill these voices. So in a way or another, what is needed is leadership. We are suffering from lack of leadership. People are dying now because of lack of leadership. If there were leaders, we could have chosen this path that we are all agreeing about.
If we can get leadership that is not leftist on either side, but is perceived as centrist and even maybe right-leaning on both sides, and get them to agree and be willing to outspokenly say, this is a direction we need to go, that would go a long way in the street, I think, as well. That's a point that you've been making.
Yeah.
Look, we think that we are on the cusp of change, both in Israel and Palestine, because our leaders have failed us in horrific ways. There might be a change on one side sooner than the other. You know, the Palestinian president is 90 years old. He's in the 19th or 20th year of a 4-year term. He has zero legitimacy amongst the Palestinian people. Hamas is hated in Gaza more than ever before. No one in Gaza wants Hamas to remain there. Hamas has even come out with statements. Even today, one of the Hamas leaders has said, we recognize that we cannot govern Gaza anymore. Hamas is going to change and reform or disappear because they have failed their people. They have brought destruction on Gaza, the kind that the Palestinian people have never seen before. Netanyahu is a failed leader who failed us in leading us to October 7th, who failed us on October 7th, and has failed us since October 7th. And even though there's the illusion that he has spiked in the polls recently because of military successes, the number of seats in his coalition, according to all the polls, does not enable him to create a majority government anymore.
He's very shaky.
I think that we are on that cusp, and what we need is to amplify the kind of voices that Samer and I are hearing. We've brought aboard Olmert and Nasser al-Kidwa, just these two leaders who people might say, who the hell are they? They're has-beens, and Olmert was convicted and went to prison. He's the most courageous politician in Israel today, and maybe he won't be a politician in the future, but his voice is listened to. In 4 months, met with 35 foreign ministers. We had an audience with the Pope that was arranged in 4 days. When the cardinal in Jerusalem, and I called him and said, we want to meet with the Pope because we're going to be in Rome meeting with the foreign minister of Italy. The cardinal in Jerusalem told me it takes months to organize a meeting with the Pope. And we got it in 4 days. We had an audience with the Pope. The same with the 35 foreign ministers that we met with. We concluded with the Moroccan foreign minister that the Moroccans are going to be organizing a meeting headed by Morocco, the Emirates, and Morocco, the Emirates, and Bahrain, to organize a meeting of about 20 countries who are going to come under the heading of meeting Olmert and Nasser al-Kidwa and fostering this in our neighborhood. We're getting support around the world for it. And our challenge now is to really bring it back to Israel and Palestine and amplify these voices that are saying, this has to end. We can't keep doing it. And the only way to move forward is by this mutual recognition of the rights of each side to have independence and freedom and dignity and security.
Bless you.
You asked about partnerships. I believe very strongly there are business partnerships, and they don't really trickle down because they're done individually, and the people who do them don't publicize them, don't talk about it. We need to convince our leaders that, Olmert is on the phone. I will call him back afterwards. We need to start with things like education. Education was an afterthought in the Oslo peace process. And by the time they got to talk about education, people resisted and didn't want to do it. We really need to start this process by saying that education is a reflection of the values of our society. And we need to get the Israelis and the Palestinians to agree that we're going to accept criteria, the same criteria, and then we're going to go back and evaluate what we teach our children, and we're going to come and propose changes. And it starts with really easy things. Like every Israeli should be learning Arabic from grade 1. Every Palestinian should be learning Hebrew from grade 1. And that's not something that's threatening. It's not like changing your historic narrative. It's something that takes the first step and say, we're living together in this land. We need to know each other a lot better. We need to speak each other's language. And that's where we can start with getting things where we can have agreement. But the challenges are huge before us. But as Samer said, it's going to start with us changing our leaders and recognizing that these people who have led us for years have failed us. And we need a new kind of leadership that not only looks backwards, because no one's going to forget their past and what the other side did to us, but we need leaders who are going to open up an eye to the future as well.
Education is critical on all sides. Here in the United States, education is critical. I can tell you that what's happening here is painful in that it goes against everything I assumed to be values that are taught from early education, and those values are out the window. The foundational values of the United States are out the window largely in the political discourse.
Trump wants to close down Trump wants to close the Department of Education.
Yes, yeah, because it could be threatening to him.
Yeah.
I think if you go at it through contact, we know it's peculiar. You shouldn't necessarily be this way, but we know that personal connections among leaders do make a difference.
Yeah,
they can be really the critical aspect because leaders are seen by everyone, and because the leaders have power. And if you can get, I think even Begin and Sadat, Thinking before this Begin-Sadat meeting, when Begin was asked, well, do we share the intelligence that there is a plot against Sadat? And he said, yes, absolutely, share it with him. And that was a key background factor for even the final meetings and peace agreement. So indeed, getting at it from the leadership, but also realizing that you cannot have enlightened leadership while the school books and general tenor of the education is educating for something different than what you're hoping for. It has to be something everyone knows that we're working toward, and just shared values. I mean, there's enough shared value, cultural values, and just human values. And building on that, I think a lot of the Hamas enterprise is a matter of suppressing ordinary human values, saying your life is not important. At worst, you'll be a shaheed, and you will be, it's not important. What's really important is the struggle, the resistance. That shouldn't be the value that you're teaching people to begin with. You should be, their lives are important, everyone else's lives are important, and general prosperity is important. Don't start hiding that. That's a normal human desire, and we want to use that as leverage to come closer together as opposed to pushing apart. So I think they're all the right ideas.
So does that mean that shifting educational things are part of the kind of trust building that you're looking for, Rafi?
Yes.
Or
The most important.
interesting.
Well, there is two of the most important enemies, for mutual enemies for Palestinians and Israelis, are incitement and hatred.
Yeah.
And
Fear.
I think I can recognize that we have incitement and hatred in our society, but I'm aware that it is a mutual problem. Maybe in one side it is more obvious, in the other side it's less obvious.
Fair enough.
Maybe in the Palestinian education system, it's in the textbooks. Maybe in the Israeli education system, it's in the discussion in the classrooms. But we can find it on both sides. In education, we find it in media. Currently, media of both sides only speaks about bad things of the other side, never about good things of the other side. We need to change all of this. We need to fight incitement and hatred wherever and whenever we find it, because it's like a pandemic.
It's poison.
You cannot defeat it at one side and leave it in the other side. It comes back. We need to fight it on both sides. It is very essential and important. It will help this process of trust building. I do believe that in the case of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you cannot reach reconciliation after a political agreement. You need reconciliation as a prerequisite, as a condition for being able and prepared to have tough decisions that will lead to a political agreement. So we need to start with reconciliation.
Like, that's why
We
these
need to
2000
teach
negotiations
ourselves.
didn't work.
We need to teach ourselves. I taught myself never to have hard feelings towards Israelis. They kill us, we kill them too. We kill them less, they kill us more. Everybody is trying his best, unfortunately, in this bloodshed. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Nobody can claim that he is Mother Teresa. Both sides are very ugly in this conflict, especially on the 7th of October and every day after the 7th of October. So we need to release ourselves from hard feelings, and we need to stop lecturing the other side. If I want to deliver a message to the other side, I should set an example. And then the other side will learn something. If I want to say that, guys, is it fair to kill kids in Gaza? I should go first to the envelope of Gaza and condemn the atrocities of the 7th of October. And I should say that for me, as a human being, before being Israeli or a Palestinian, as a human being, as a Palestinian, for me, the life of every single kid and civilian that was killed on the 7th of October, I shed the same tears on every civilian and kid that is killed in Gaza now. Because for me, a life of a kid in Kfar Azza is as important as the life of a kid in Gaza, 1 kilometer away. And I don't find any justification for anybody, for any reason, to steal the life of any of these kids. For me, if a Palestinian state will be achieved over a body of 1,200 Israelis on the 7th of October, I don't want this Palestinian state. Because I want to reach to a Palestinian state in a moral mean. For me, moral cause do not justify the means. The means should be moral also. Or I lose my morality if I use different means. Now, is it okay for Israelis to find justification for killing civilians in Gaza? It's up to them. I only hold the responsibility on condemning what my people have done. And I leave the things for the other side to decide about.
As an Israeli, I can say, I can tell you, I feel indeed for all the pain in Gaza. I feel it deeply. I do think there's been mismanagement from the government, but I don't know that there would have been any solution that would have been possible without this terrible suffering on the Gaza sites. Not that I don't feel it.
We both have.
We don't have to agree on this, but I want to tell you, if I say that some military action.
Let me explain for you something, Rafael. I don't want to argue. As I told you, I leave this for Israelis, not for today, not for you, for some Israeli one day to come and say something about it. But I think I don't accept the justification of any Palestinian to say that we needed to do what we have done on the 7th of October because they don't understand except of power, blah, blah, blah. This is bullshit. We have other choices to do. And I cannot accept the argument that there was no other choices. There were other choices. For example, if I were the Palestinian president on the 7th of October, I would have woke up at 7 o'clock, hearing the news, drive my car directly without requesting protocol and visit the Israeli prime minister, knock his door and tell him, please hold your horses. I am your partner into finding a solution for this. I don't agree. First of all, let's create a coalition. Everybody was against the 7th of October. The Americans created a coalition to fight Daesh after the 11th of September. Let's create a regional coalition where Arab countries, those who are in peace agreement, where the Americans, where the Europeans, where the whole world will fight Hamas. We'll fight Hamas after evacuating the civilians. There were choices.
If my only argument was absence of choice, and you're saying there were choices, and you may be right, and we don't have to necessarily agree with, but I completely agree with the spirit of what you're saying, which is if there are choices, we need to pursue them. Arab lives are not cheap. Every Palestinian life is a whole world. Every individual is a whole world that you are losing, and whether what you're suggesting is practical, would have been a practical choice, I don't know. But the fact that you're thinking in that direction, I think, is wonderful. And that needs to be the way forward. We need to build coalition based on our common goals and common values, and as much as possible, get to our goals without bloodshed. I mean, that's clearly a desirable approach.
More important, Rafael, we need to stop keeping our both eyes on the 7th of October and the war. We need both to shift one eye to the future. Else we will be living there forever.
I can tell you that listening to the two of you gives me the most hope I've had in a very, very long time. Really, genuinely, the most hope I've had for a long time in progress at all, and particularly in progress along a two-state solution. Not that I see any alternative, really. There is the Friedman one-state plan, which tried to walk a fine line between full rights and local full, not important. I don't know that it's practical. There are many interesting observations that he makes. This is the Friedman one-state solution, one Jewish state solution. Friedman, who was the ambassador, Trump's ambassador to Israel. Interesting ideas, but I don't know that anything. I would love to make progress along the lines that you are suggesting.
One question.
Yes, Twitter.
I just learned this in this last 3 days that when Sapir Hundelman does these workshops, he ends up with very, very similar propositions to the ones that we ended up with just completed today. What does that tell us? That you bring together sensible, probably emotionally intelligent, the people, and you come up with very, very similar, or not very, very, somewhat similar arrangements. What comes up as you think about what there is to learn from that?
As far as the mechanism, it does tell us that well-meaning people that would participate in such events could probably get along with each other very well. It doesn't necessarily ensure that anything they proposes would withstand the presence of the minorities that will continue to distrust or fear or hate or whatever. And unfortunately, it's not only up to the maybe well-meaning majority to come up with a solution that will satisfy only them. If they don't actually take into account what the dynamics will be with that problematic minority, then in fact, we've gotten nowhere. And in fact, it's so easy for the minority to sabotage a really wonderfully designed plan. And that's where the challenge lies. Even if you have a majority that is along with the plan.
Does it tell you two anything? That the plans look the same or look very similar?
I think that one of the problems that we faced during the 30-year Oslo peace process was that the leaders on both sides failed to have a strategy to deal with those spoilers on both sides of the conflict. And the spoilers assassinated our prime minister, and the spoilers created Hamas that took over Gaza. And there needs to be a recognition that first, there's never anything called hermetic security. What needs to be put to the test here is whether or not the two sides are committed to make 100% effort to allow the spoilers to spoil the process. And this is how we're going to have to look forward. There are going to be extremists on both sides who continue to use violence to destroy us all. And while we may be able to prevent some of them, we won't be able to prevent all of them. And then the bottom line test is going to be, did each side make the maximum amount of efforts to allow them to destroy our lives? And how much cooperation there is between them, as you said, Raphael, with the example of Israel providing intelligence information to Egypt. This is where the bottom line is going to come in. How much are we working to ensure that each side has the maximum security possible under a commitment that we are going to share this land and live together in peace?
Beautifully said. We have to tolerate imperfection. We have to not let the failures undermine the whole plan.
Exactly.
Marvelous. Well, everyone here, if they've got some questions or points or observations about the 3 days we just went through, this is a good time to make them. And then I'd like to kind of play us out because there's a wonderful talk that one of the participants, Amir, gave at Union Square when she was the only Palestinian during a commemoration of October 7th. So I can play us out with a little bit of her wonderful talk, which I think needs to be turned into a song. So if someone knows a lyricist, I think this talk could be made into a wonderful peace song. So any questions or thoughts? Anyone can unmute and observe, ask a question, or what have you. Simone, do you want to say or ask something? She raised her hand.
Just wanted to say it makes it sound like they were just really sensible people around the table and we didn't have our difficulties in this conference. We have been presented with quite radical views in the group, and it took a lot of deep breathing and there were also raised voices. So it wasn't just like
Good.
sensible people sitting around a table talking sensible things. So it comes a bit across as that. Me as an outside observer, this was rocky and highly emotional, and there was a lot of empathy given. And a lot of times when empathy was really hard and it didn't quite come across as that, and things got more heated. So this wasn't just like people agreeing on peace. We got there. It was a
That makes it
birth.
even all the more convincing, I would think, that where you got.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And what Sapir Handelman said, like when they had like 1,000 of each side, they were like from the whole spectrum, from the whole education. You know, it's like if you speak to educated people, they can come up with an outside of their own emotions view. But if you take like from the whole population, a little bit of everything, and it can still come to a very similar peace agreement than we came together with, there is hope. There is space to even hold people that walk in and put a really strong view of hate on the table, which was hard for us all to swallow. And it happened. And that really warmed my heart and gave me so much hope that this is actually a really progressive way forward. I just wanted to thank everyone that was there. And I'm just humbled to have been a witness there. Thank you.
Thanks for adding that. That was actually very important, what you just said.
Okay, I think I'm going to play us out with this a chunk of this wonderful talk. And let's see, how do I do that? Share my screen. Oh, no. Back to Zoom, unshare, and make sure that I'm doing it with the audio correctly. Optimize, there it is.
So let me start by sharing a poem from my home by Mahmoud Darwish. We have on this land what makes life worth living, the struggle of ancestors and the awe of love when the morning begins. Ladies and gentlemen, friends of peace, my brothers and sisters in humanity, thank you for being here today. Thank you for choosing to stand together in the sacred space, Union Square, where voices from all walks of life have come together for generations to fight for justice, equality, and our children's future. As Mahmoud Darwish, our great poet, reminds us, even in the deepest struggles, life offers things worth fighting for. Love, hope, and the dreams we carry for our children. Today, I don't speak to you only as a Palestinian or just as a peace activist. I speak to you as a mother. I come from Bethlehem, a city of ancient history and faith where Jesus was born, and a place of immense struggle. I have a 9-year-old son, and every day, like every mother, I dream of a good future for him that is free from fear, violence, and occupation. Today, October 7th, we come together to mourn. We remember the innocent Israeli lives lost on this day. Exactly 1 year ago, those who died were mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters, each a cherished, irreplaceable part of their families. As a mother, I stand with the Israeli families who now carry unimaginable pain. I know the weight of loss, and I mourn with them. Unfortunately, this grief is not new. It did not start on 7th of October. We have lived with loss for decades. Tens of thousands of Palestinians' lives have also been taken and forever lost by violence, bombing, occupation, and displacement, just like the Israeli families. We too wake up every day mourning loved ones.
So we obviously had a very special group to work with during these 3 days. Back to Zoom. Stop sharing. Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Will this video be accessible?
Yes, it's Life, Light, and Curious. I'll send you the URL.
I would appreciate it greatly. This was really an opening, which I think will encourage many. And so I just wish Gershon and Samir the best in continuing what they're doing. And I'd love to help if in some way. In any case, keep doing what you're doing. It's wonderful.
Thank you, guys.
you.
Shabbat Shalom for everyone.
Thank you.